Hi everyone. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to finish a arm for your Knit Flexing Cactus. All right, so you can see I have the body here. If you saw my last video, it was casting off and stuffing and closing up the body of the cactus. So now it's going to need some arms. All right, so I have in the pattern, if you're following along, I have finished one arm here. Okay, so I've worked my my 10 rows. All right, if you are following along with the pattern, you'll see that this piece needs to be worked flat as opposed to in the round like the cactus. All right, I still recommend using a circular needle or double pointed needle for this, because when you cast off, you're going to need to be able to access the other side, because when we cinch this up, we want to cinch it up in a circle. All right, and I'm going to be showing you guys how that will look. All right, so I'm finished here. I finished my last row and I'm ready to cast off. So how this is going to end up looking is going from a flat piece to this, basically this little tube. All right, so when I cast off, I'm going to run my yarn tail through the loops here, and it's going to turn it into this little tube shape, and then I'm going to seam up the sides. So I'm going to bring these two edges together basically. All right, and then this will be a closed little tube. So in order to do that, I left myself a nice generous tail. I think it's better to have more yarn here than not enough, especially because we're going to be running it through the loops and casting it off the needles, and then we're going to also use that same tail to seam up the edge and get all the way down to the bottom here. All right, so if I'm looking at this piece from the top, all right, or maybe you're on your double pointed needles, you're going to move that piece to the other end. All right, because I want to work my yarn tail through in a circle to go through those loops. All right, so I'm going to bring it to the opposite side, and I'm going to do the same thing I did as I was looping, like through the loops and off the needle for the cactus body. All right, so I'm going to go through each loop. My camera does not want to cooperate today. Through each loop, off the needle. I'll just have to excuse my bump here in the video. All right, through the loop, off the needle. Can kind of pull as I go through. All right, and off my last few there. Okay, so then I'm going to pull that yarn tail all the way tight. Okay, so now I've got a closed top for my arm. All right, and now my tail is here on this side, and it's ready to just be run straight down and through the loops on either side here to close this up. And then essentially you're just gonna have this little tube arm. All right, so maybe if I bring this a little closer, it'll focus better. Okay, so I'm gonna start by just lining this up. So looking at the two edges, and I'm gonna just line these up as best as I can. All right, and then I'm gonna start by just running my tail through like one side and then back over to the other side. So I'm gonna go through one side here, and then I'm gonna go through a loop on the opposite side and then back through. So I'm just gonna seam this up. I guess it doesn't matter which loops you're going through as long as they line up and you're able to get it to run like almost like a spiral down that whole edge. So I'm gonna go from one side to the other side. And when you get to the end, as long as you don't have any holes or gaps here, it doesn't really matter how perfect this looks or if it's like perfectly smooth. I just want to make sure I'm running it through a loop from each side. So I'm just gonna keep going through and Go nice and slow so you guys can see what I'm doing here. So one loop from each side and just seaming it up. Kind of just finding loops that line up and match up as I'm going down the edge. Again, it won't really matter once you finish this if it's perfect or not. Doesn't need to be perfect. And I'll probably go through maybe one more. And now I'm to the bottom. So this is all stitched up. I don't have any holes or anything sticking out. And I'm just gonna pull it nice and tight. All right, and now I've got my arm. All right, so I'm ready to add some stuffing to the arm. All right, and then I'm gonna show you guys how to get that bend in the shape there. All right, so I'm gonna grab a little bit of my stuffing. And I'm just going to stuff, but not overstuff. Okay, so similar to the cactus, you wanna make sure you've got enough stuffing in there to hold the shape, but you don't wanna see too much of the stuffing through the yarn. Okay, so you guys can see here, don't wanna be able to see any stuffing through the stitches, especially because now we're gonna curve this. And as we curve it, we're kind of stretching those stitches a bit. So we wanna make sure that everything is like it's stuffed, but that it's not too stuffed, all right? You can always add a little bit more stuffing to the end here if you need to later on. All right, so to create that bend, what I'm gonna do is I can use either yarn tail at this point. I'm gonna use whichever one's longer. So I'm gonna use the one I already have on my needle, okay? I'm gonna run my yarn tail back through a series of loops, and then I'm gonna loop back down and go through a series of loops again. So you can kind of look at your piece here. It really doesn't matter which section. Like you could go through these loops, back down through these loops. You could try to go through these loops. This is kind of where I joined. It's a little bit more rough. You could go through these loops, back down through these loops. It's really not a big deal which one you choose. I think what I'm gonna do is go up through the loops here, which is where I seamed it together. And then I'm gonna come back down through the loops on the right side of this stitch here. All right, so I'm just gonna run my yarn needle through these loops. Try to hold this still so you guys can see here. My camera is not cooperating today. All right, so I'm gonna run it through the loops, and I don't have to get every single loop. It's okay if you don't. All right, run it through a few, and then I'm just gonna pull this through to get it going. Okay, so I've run it through these here. I'm gonna go all the way to the top, to the very top. So I'm gonna go all the way to this top loop, and then I'm gonna pull that tail through. Okay, now I'm going to pull tight, and that's what's gonna create that bend in the arm. So I'm pulling on that yarn, and you can see how it's creating that curved shape. Okay, next what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go back down, so I could go back through those same loops again if I wanted to, or I can go like over one section, which is what I'm gonna do here. So I'm gonna go over one section, since these loops are a little easier to get to, and I'm just gonna go back through each one of these loops with my needle, and do this in sections if you need to. You don't have to do it all at once. You don't have to try, you can just do like 2 or 3 loops at a time. And I'm gonna go all the way down. Again, if you skip one, it's not a huge deal, until I get all the way back to the bottom and go through one more. All right, so what I did was go up through these loops, around, and then back down. All right, now I'm gonna pull this tight again, really tight, because I want that arm to bend. And then I'm gonna kind of just squish and shape it a bit. Now, if you get to this point and you realize you didn't add enough stuffing, you can always add a little bit more stuffing. Like, I think I'm gonna add just a little bit more to the bottom. And by a little bit, I really mean just a little bit. All right, so I'm gonna stuff this in. Make sure my tail is nice and tight. And now I have my first arm. All right, so it's ready to be stitched onto my cactus body. Okay, so I like to do the first one as my left arm. You can really do this however you want. I've been making these cactuses, cacti, for a while, so I have kind of a method here, but you can really do it however you want. You can position them however you want. Maybe you want one on one side to be a little bit higher, one to be a little bit lower. You want them to be equal. You want them to both be a little bit lower. It's really up to you. You could add a third arm if you wanted to. All right, so I can use either one of these tails. Again, I'm just gonna use whichever one's longest, which is probably this one. And I'm going to find the spot where I want to join. All right, and then I'm just gonna kind of line it up on the body. All right, so I think I want it to go right there. All right, so I'm gonna use my tail and I'm just gonna go through, this is gonna be hard to show you guys, but I'm just gonna go through one stitch. All right, I'm gonna take that tail, I'm gonna run it through, and that's just gonna get me started. Okay, so now I'm attached here to the side of my cactus body. I wanna make sure that arm has a nice little flex to it. Okay, and then I'm gonna go from basically running it through the stitches from the body and then running it through the loops on the bottom of my arm. Okay, so I'll just show you guys a couple here to get you started, but I'm gonna go through. Each time I wanna pull it nice and tight. Okay, now you can kind of go with the stitches here. So I'll loop through the next stitch, pull it nice and tight, and then I'm gonna come through the loops at the bottom of the arm. All right, I'm gonna go through the next one. Again, you can stop, line it up, make sure it's matching in the right spot, and then run it through your next stitch, back through the arm, and then pull it nice and tight. And you're just gonna continue just like that until you get all the way around, stitching through the body, through the arm, the body, through the arm, until you get all the way around, and you're gonna end up with something that looks like this. All right, and again, make sure that you're pulling it nice and tight so you don't have any gaps there. You can kind of see how this one is looking. All right, and then that will be your finished cactus. So once you get all the way around, you'll just kind of hide that yarn tail. And then once you get to this point, you can kind of squish and shape those arms and the body exactly how you want. Put it in your cute little mug or in your little pot, however you want to display your cactus. And you have a cute cactus. You can add some twinkle lights to it. You could put a little flower on the front. You could give it a little Santa hat, whatever season you're making this in. All right, so hopefully you guys found that video helpful. If you have any questions at all, please comment or shoot me a message and I'll be happy to help you out. And hope you guys enjoy this pattern, and happy knitting.